Today's video, it's all about my oil storage bottle and how it works. It's just a very simple idea. So what we've got, this is a used propane bottle, and we've got a line coming from your air compressor, and it pressurizes the top part of the old propane bottle, and when it does that, it just forces the oil up this pipe, and that goes to my oil burner. It's a simple idea. When I worked as a motor mechanic, we had the same idea. When we used to drain the oil out of vehicles, we had to put it somewhere. So what happened, the air compressor line came in, and this went into a coupling in the wall and to a big tank. So I didn't think of this idea, but I think it's a great idea and it works really well. But the first one I used was a 9.5 kilo gas bottle, and there were two problems with it. I persevered for a while with it, but in the end I changed over to a 45 kilo bottle, and I'll show you why. With 9.5 kilos, there was roughly the same amount of oil in there. It wasn't quite enough to actually do 2 melts. So filling it up, it had a very small hole there, and when you used the funnel, it took a long time to purge the air out, so it was a real pain in the neck to do that. This is the first effort in using compressed oil to feed my oil burner. Very simple arrangement. You've got your air connection fitting there, and you can see I've drawn a white line. Now what it does, goes down there and around this tube and pressurises the top of the oil storage bottle. And this one here, you can see the white line. This is the discharge line to the oil burner. So it goes up that pipe, and this is the thread. This actually screws into your fitting in your gas bottle. Now to make this up, I've had to make that first, then weld, or what, I've forgotten exactly how I did it, silver solder I think, but anyway, that goes into here. So after you've done that, you can weld another tube along here, and you weld the fitting onto here. So it's in 3 pieces. This is 1, 2 and 3. And like I said, it worked really well, but the problem was with low storage capacity, and it was a pain to try and fill up. So we'll talk about safety. You must have, if you use this idea, you must have an isolation valve, because if this hose where it goes through the oil burner, if that bursts or comes off there, you'll have oil going everywhere. So that is safety number 1. You've got to have an isolation valve, so if that ever breaks or anything happens, you can quickly turn it off, from preventing a small disaster becoming a big disaster. Here is the fitting that I've made up in reverse direction. So there is the actual thread where it screws into the neck of the bottle, and there's the end of the pipe. And one tip I advise you to do, I found out the hard way, I put this pipe virtually to the bottom of the bottle, and I was using waste oil, and what happens, the water will settle out after months of non-use, and what will happen is this will be all water here. So this part here, the intake, always put it about that far from the bottom, and it minimises that problem. This is my 9.5 kilo storage bottle, the very first one I used, and you can see down there, that's where the old valve used to go in there. So my fitting that I made just screws into there, and I'll show you. And there it is. That's how I used to use it. So in the next clip I'll show you my present way of doing it with the 45 kilo bottle. This is version 2.0 of my oil storage bottle, and there is the line that goes to almost the bottom of the tank. That's where the oil comes out, and that there is the all important isolation valve. Must have one. And then that's the line that goes off to your oil burner. This is the other part of my storage bottle where I solve the other problem. There's a separate filler so I don't have to worry about bleeding the air out, but also it solves another problem. I can pressurize the air so it goes in and pushes the oil out along that line, and it all works really well. Here is another safety tip that you must know, and I'm not sure whether everyone does know that, is with these bottles you must never ever pressurize it with pure oxygen. That is absolutely begging for a disaster. Oxygen accelerates combustion and causes a lot of problems, whereas air does not. So if you do this idea, use it. Never ever use oxygen. So it comes to the other point. Someone's going to say, well, you're using compressed air, and compressed air will cause problems and probably an explosion. Well, it's not, because if you know how a diesel engine works, a diesel engine suddenly compresses oil and then they inject the diesel in and then it fires. But there's two things needed for this to go off like a rocket. And one is you need very high pressure, which this is nowhere near it. It's not even 700 kPa. And the second thing you need, when air is compressed in a cylinder, like in a diesel engine cylinder, the diesel is injected right at the time when it gets really hot, near the top of the stroke. So it fires. So with this one here, you are not doing that. You're only using a very low pressure, and it does not get hot inside, not like inside a diesel engine cylinder, which gets up to a very high temperature to ignite the diesel. So this idea is totally safe. I've used it for years and years and never had a problem with it. And the other thing you've got to do, make sure whatever bottle you use, it will take the pressure. Might seem simple, but it's a fact. You're using a pressurized cylinder, you have to be extremely careful. Make sure you do have a cylinder that will take that pressure.